Again, we're all about, an overview on coaching. We're going to talk about what I call these coaching leadership superpowers. Elise is going to take us through delegation tools and techniques, and then we're going to practice some of this group coaching today in troikas. So in groups of 3, there might be 1 or 2 groups of 4, but we're going to really try to focus on groups of 3 if we can get there. So kind of coming back to our initial chat, for those of you that dropped something in the chat, thank you so much for that. Someone actually literally said this. It's like they saw the slide. Leaders are really focused on leading people versus tasks or things. And typically they're doing that towards some kind of a common goal or vision for that group or maybe their company. They're often seen on the job, hopefully, if they're great leaders, as inspirational. They're very motivating. And yeah, they put down that proper amount of challenge, but not too much challenge, so that it feels unsurmountable. They make the challenge digestible for the team. Whereas, managers typically are leading things. Not one of these is better than the other. And in fact, I would say many CEOs that I work with are still managing a fair amount of work product, quality of work that's coming out of the company. There definitely is times when managers, of course, are leaders and leaders are managers. I don't want you to think of, well, I'm a leader now, so therefore I don't have to manage anymore. I would argue that, CEOs are still doing a fair amount of planning, organizing, and coordinating. They might be doing it more through people and less independently, meaning that they have a team of people maybe that they're working with. But I don't want you to think of these as separate entities. They really, usually work together. Oftentimes, you may work with a great manager, but maybe the leadership skills are not great. And many of us work with people who are amazing leaders, really good, this phrase, people, they're a real people person. They're inspiring and are motivational, but they really don't do much managing. They don't really get their hands dirty. And you kind of need a mix of both, I would argue, on the job for that proper, again, that inspirational, motivational. A lot of people are inspired when someone can kind of get up aside of them, not necessarily doing the work for them. And that's why we're talking about, coaching leadership today, because great leaders and managers are great coaches to their people. And, Lisa and I spent, my gosh, hours and hours in schooling and, exam preparation to become credentialed in this field. To become a coach through the International Coaching Federation is not an easy feat. We don't expect for all of you to do that work, right? But what we're going to do today is kind of give you the secrets and the highlights of what I wish I had known when I was in the career field as even a chief operating officer. If I look back on that time saying, oh man, if only I would have coached those people a little bit more versus managed them. And there is a distinction between these two things. And that's really what we're going to dive into today. So, what is coaching? Okay, it is a one-on-one relationship that you enjoy, not necessarily even with a subordinate or someone that reports to you. Oftentimes, I say to Elise, and she says to me, "Hey, do you have an hour for me? I could use some coaching. I don't know what to do about this situation or this business challenge, or I don't know how to do X, Y, or Z." It's really looking more like at a developmental focus. It's not, well, Jen, tell me the 15 things that are on your task list and take me through, one by one, give me a project update or a status update on that. It's really built more on the relationship. It's definitely much more conversational than what I just described, which is, where's your punch list? Let's go through it. And if you adopt some of these practices, even if you took 20% of this class today and implemented that on the job, you would see dramatic improvement in your people and in their problem solving ability to do some of that without you. But in the beginning, it does feel awkward. It's like if you wear a size 7 shoe, I'm giving you a size 8, and you're like, well, this doesn't feel right. I feel like I need to ask about status and updates, and not, well, what do you think the first thing is to do, right? There's a lot of questions that coaches ask. Some are harder than others. But we're going to really ask you to almost like take off, for those of you that are managing, and many of us still are, kind of take that hat off today, that manager hat of controlling things and process, and think about putting on a coaching hat today. I think you'll kind of come on this journey with us and it will be pretty cool. So, we talked about the differences between coaching, or I'm sorry, between managing and leading. Now, when we get into like, what do we think the differences are based on everything that I just said in this preamble of between coaching and managing? Does anybody want to come off mute and venture a guess?
To me, it's like managing is being told what to do and coaching is how to do it.
On the nose. Very good. Yes. In fact, you could kind of look at it almost like a continuum, right? If you're managing, you're telling, like, gosh, I'll give you your $5 after class because you teed that up perfectly. If you're coaching, you're asking. And this is at a really foundational level. Managers, and oh, by the way, there is a time and place to help solve problems, to give advice and make suggestions. But what we're really wanting to focus more on today is the coaching side, which is using the feedback skills that you learned last week, challenging the thinking, and really spending much more time listening than talking. And this is a huge transition, particularly for those of you, that are like influencers or, personable, again, those people where we really want to have like a two-way dialogue. Sometimes we may consume by talking more than we should. So we're really going to lean in. We're not going to cover listening skills today, because you can do a Google search and you will find 1,000 things on how to be a better listener. But we're going to talk about it in the context of being a coach to your team, to your peers. Anybody can coach. And in fact, I would even argue, as you would think that, oh, I'm only going to be coaching the people that directly report to me. Well, no, it's kind of like mentoring or advising. Sometimes coaching can happen with anyone at any time. In the Dropbox, I did put like the key differences between coaching, advising, therapy, consulting. I mean, we have all of these different kinds of business advisors in our lives, and kind of, if you're building your tribe, it's a nice guide. So if you look that up in the Dropbox, pull it down, and happy to answer any questions if you want to send me an email on that. But coaching and the primary difference, so we've kind of talked about coaching and managing. Coaching and like therapy, because how many of us have felt like a therapist on the job? Oh, look at the HR people are like, and we all have, right? This is not therapy. So coaching is about forward momentum, how to get that person out of the muck in the present and getting them moving forward. Therapy is really about trauma and things that have happened in the past that sometimes we need to resolve. We've progressed with our lives and somehow it caught up to us, and occasionally we all need to be in therapy. But if you kind of remember, coaching is about forward momentum for the most part. I mean, there are a lot of different facets of therapy, but therapy really helps you resolve your past. And so if you start to put that hat on, it may change your perspective. We'll see. I'll ask again at the end of class. So, the objectives for coaching, right, is definitely to help people understand what is possible. And we do this, and I know this is going to sound a little bit manipulative, and I don't want it to come across like you're manipulating people, but by asking the right kinds of questions and engaging in a two-way dialogue, you can really help people uncover as if it's their own idea of what they need to do next. And then the next time they say, gosh, I don't know what to do next. The hope and the idea is, after several times of coaching them through that, oh yeah, they're going to know because they've already done it, but also they've already learned it verbally in the communication with you. So stay with me as I come into a few more slides here. This will get clearer. You may like question, well, what have you already tried? And why do you think that's not working? By really pulling out, richer dialogue than we typically have on the job when things are so fast paced. And it just is essentially helping them to further develop and of course become unstuck. So hopefully that I have your attention as to, yes, I think I could be better at this. What are the things that happen as an outcome when you adopt more of a coaching mindset, more of an asking mindset versus a telling mindset? The first thing is just a greater awareness and understanding of the person that you're working with or that you're coaching. Because when you're spending more time listening and asking questions, you can really kind of sit and understand the mindset and really understand that person much more so than if it becomes just, what are we working on? How do we unblock this client? What does this look like to make this sale? It's a very, very different kind of relationship. You're broadening and deepening thought by asking those questions and having that person vocalize some of their thoughts and feelings and ideas. The outcomes usually result in wiser decisions and actions. And of course, the big one is, more independent thinking and action. I know many of us, and the more senior you get in your job, it used to be if you worked with someone maybe that had 5 or 10 years difference. Say you're 40, you're working with someone who's 30. You're like, okay, I remember what it was like. But when you are 45 working with someone who's 22, that gap, that span gets very, very far. And we lose touch. It becomes more challenging to usually work with those people when there's a broader gap, right? And so this will help inspire, you're hoping. The outcome is that they are able to, essentially fish for themselves, and not having you every step along the way. Because let's face it, if you are in that demographic, let's use the 45 to 25, 20 years is a long span. When you were 25 in the workplace, the challenges and the problems are not the same as they were, back when you were 25 versus today. So, how do you build that bridge is by hoping that you're inspiring that independent thought and action. But I will tell you, the more senior you get in your career, the older you get, the more junior those entry level people get, the more frustrating that experience is. So it's only by adopting this coaching mindset can we really get much better at it. So, sorry about that. There really, there are multiple superpowers that we could kind of adopt when we're thinking about, adopt like being a better coach on the job. We can't get to all of them today. We're going to cover four that I think are really, really important. And the first is just starting with the relationship. Do you have a know, like, and trust? Do I know this person? Maybe you don't love this person, but have I found some commonality, some things that I can enjoy and like about this person? And do I trust this person? You can really do that through investing in the relationship and hopefully through coaching. This concept of empowering questions, many of you that are, journalism majors, the open-ended or in, what we call empowering questions are super important. Why does goal setting work, and where does accountability and feedback fit into this mix? So it absolutely is, again, investing in the relationship. Oftentimes they're like, oh, this is your direct report, Janet. And we're going right into the work, right? And oh, we're providing a lot of feedback, right? But if you don't have the connection and the trust and the rapport with that person, it's very difficult to give feedback, make corrective actions, unless you're connected with that person. And this is really difficult to do in times of Zoom, right? It's not like we're having lunch and casual conversations with people. And so, it's to remember, there are boundaries, right, and ground rules to the relationship. I'm not suggesting that you become best friends with these people, but trust and focusing on the relationship really comes first. And so, when you begin to adopt this coaching mindset of asking questions, letting that person talk, become comfortable and engaging with you, trust happens, but also, what we call the coachee. So whoever it is, whether it is a peer, maybe you have a new, if you're a vice president, a new vice president has been brought into the company, and ultimately by asking questions and really leaning in and listening to the answers when you ask a question, helps build that trust and lets the coachee know that you have their best interest at heart. So that's the first one is, it's really difficult to start coaching, on day one when you've met someone. You really want to make sure that you have the relationship first. These are the different, and there's a lot of different kinds of empowering questions, right? But where does it start? And I love this picture of this kid, because he's like, I'm curious, what's over there? And it's kind of being almost childlike. My daughter, now who is 23, asked a ton of questions when she was little. And what I learned, so many questions. And what I learned in when I went to coaching school is like, it's funny, as children, we're like, stop asking so many questions, or you only get 3 more questions, like, because we can sometimes be frustrated, or why? Well, because I said so, right? We really want to try to encourage you to get almost childlike in your curiosity in your work with someone. And this is really hard to do, particularly when we're under pressure and stress as leaders. But it's, looking at how can I learn more about this situation, about this person, and really adopting this curiosity mindset. The best way to do that is through this concept of empowering questions. And really the questions that typically are more open-ended always start right with what and how. So, what do you think the next step is much better than why did you choose that as the next step? You see the difference? And so you really want to have that person feel much more empowered. They can be challenging, right? How do you think we should accomplish this? So if someone comes to you, oh my gosh, Sue, I didn't pull the ASQ report for that client. And then when I did it, it didn't come out. And so we have a tendency to be like, did you try this? Did you try this? That's not an open-ended question. Essentially now you're the shell answer man. You're the problem solver. It's more, well, what have you already tried? And then sometimes, guess what? The coaching, because they're like, well, I didn't try to pull the report. I was worried. I wanted to talk to you first, right? Sometimes like the coaching stops there. Say, well, why don't you go try that and come back? And then we can talk about it, right? I mean, some simple things. So we also want to try to make these questions short and crisp. So to help, I did send an email in the Dropbox. You'll see the Troika breakouts. There's a lot of really good open-ended. I have some worksheets up in the Dropbox today that will help you articulate these open-ended, challenging, short and crisp questions. We don't want them to go on so long that then the person loses track of the question. So we want them to be about 8 words or less if you can do it. And again, avoiding problem solving. So did you try to reboot? Did you see Laura over in accounting? Did you go to, essentially you're kind of problem solving. So we want to try to avoid that in the beginning. And then today, when we're going to be practicing this, you'll see that in the beginning, when you're first taking this coaching mindset, it can be difficult. Always remember, you don't want to learn everything about their problem. You don't want to go back to the beginning of, I'll use the ASQ report of like why we started, it's really trying to keep the coaching at a level where you're not solving the problem, but you're also not going so deep that now you're talking about, oh my gosh, we're redoing this report that we've done for the last 5 years. There's a time and place for that, but that might not be happening during the coaching. You're really just helping them to expand they're thinking about this problem. And you will be very surprised in the beginning when you're aware of, oh my gosh, the last 3 times this person came to me about the ASQ report, I ended up doing it because we just want to solve the problem. Okay, you know what? I'll just do it, right? What great leaders do is they inspire and motivate their team to say, I can do this. I know how to do this. I'm empowered to do this, instead of I'm helpless. Sue has to be the one to pull the report. And that's just how it is. We really want to try to draw out, well, what would it be like if you completed the ASQ report on Mondays before noon? What do you think? How do you think, like, what would the impact be on the team? And you're kind of helping them get into that future state, right? And I know this isn't totally clear yet, but we will get there, I promise. You want to provoke them to think and not provide your thoughts. That's the number one outcome of empowering questions. And you'll know when they start to come to you, instead of saying, oh my God, the ASQ report is down, they'll be saying, well, I've been unable to pull this report. Here's what I've already tried. Here's what I think might be a possible solution, and now you might say, oh, great. Well, tell me why you think that is, what would make that beneficial to the team? So you're really trying to, again, draw them out. So some great examples, how can I best support you? What do you think the real issue is here? What matters most to you? Tell me what you mean by that, or what are you afraid of? If you pull the report and the data's wrong, is that what it is? Or are you afraid to make a mistake? Like, you're really trying to get them to kind of come out of the typical relationship of, I will fix your problem and tell you what to do. You want them to feel empowered that they can fix the problem. And you do that by asking these kinds of questions. And if you just even wrote down 3 or 4 of these in your next one-on-one, this is a great one. Tell me more. Say more about that. If someone comes, they're upset, you almost want to exhaust them. So, Johnny is like, oh my God, I'm so upset. This happened, this happened. Oh, well, tell me more. And eventually they'll kind of run themselves out. And then now they're open. They're a little more open. But in the beginning, when someone is upset, right, you almost want to kind of like, I want to say, exhaust them in a way so that then they can move into problem solving. They need to get that energy out. And a lot of ways to do that are through these very short, concise, empowering questions. So goal setting, obviously, we may know this about goals, right? If we put something out on our social media, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, the likelihood, there have been a lot of studies done that doesn't typically work for people. But if you share it with maybe a supervisor, a spouse, your odds go up incrementally every time you versus just setting a goal in your mind and you just carry it around with you. Oh, I need to lose 50 pounds. But if you write it down in a planner, you may have an increase in getting those odds to come up that you actually will lose that weight. If you write them down, you set them, and then you share them with someone like an accountability partner, your odds double pretty much that they're going to be increased. If you then say to someone, not only am I going to share them with you, but I'm going to have you hold me accountable, to maybe you have an employee who talks too much during client meetings. They just are talking too much. And so you've given them the feedback and it's not quite working. Then they bring a goal to you. I really do. I want to talk less in client meetings, but I want to be really smart when I do talk. Do you think you could help me? So when you see me either talking too much, or maybe you could call out when I am saying something that's really smart and value added to the conversation, the odds go up really exponentially that they would be more likely to maybe talk less, but have broader or greater impact on that conversation if you can get someone to partner with you and hold you accountable. It really does make a huge difference. So you're hopefully that person. So I've been unable to pull the report. I'm frustrated. I'm set, but I say, you know what, Sue, you're right. I've made the decision. I'm gonna take this reporting over next month, and I want you to provide me the feedback on how that's going. So that's where you want to get to. And for those of you that have maybe set New Year's resolutions, maybe you didn't write them down. Maybe you didn't share them. Maybe you didn't assign someone, to help you be accountable to those. You can see the odds go up greatly. Some great questions that you might challenge, like when someone is having a hard time sticking to, a goal. So they say, I want to talk less. You go to an account meeting and they talked the entire time. And you say, well, you give them the SBI feedback, but maybe you're asking, well, what's the cost of not making this change? Or you say you can't do it, but what would it look like if you could? Let's, see if you can get them into that future state. I'm not going to cover this today, but I will put this visual in the Dropbox for those of you that, just want a refresher on SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So when you're working with someone, it becomes, I don't want to say irrefutable, because there's always, like soft science, but if you can make this a little bit more relevant, so I'm going to, be more value added in client engagements, and I'd like to be able to do that by the end of the second quarter. And because this is important, because I'm getting placed on this big piece of business, we really want to make sure that we're able to kind of keep them time bound as well as measurable. So that's something we can definitely, I think, all use. But again, there'll be a handout on this. So this is where I think we get into some hot water. And people say, well, gosh, this is for companies. Maybe you have accountability as a value. Actually, my company, we had accountability as a value. We always struggled because, you're like, okay, well, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. There's some really great coaching questions. Here are 3 that you can, so you're disappointed. They didn't get the assignment done. They said they were going to do it. Well, I'm curious, what did you achieve instead of doing that report? Because you said you were going to do it. And so maybe there's a perfectly good amount of, or a good rationale. Or what was the competing priority here? Like, help me understand, maybe there's something else going on versus you didn't get that report done. That was ineffective. You may also want to use a coaching leadership technique if you've tried the feedback to understand what are the underlying reasons that this is continuing to come up again. Or, if this came up again, what would you do? Because the report was important. It sounds like this other thing was important. And again, they are doing that problem solving. You're not picking that up and saying, oh, I'm going to fix this for you. Sue, you're off the hook for that report. I'm going to put Bob on it. A lot of times we do that. We want them to try to be the problem solver. And what happens is when I say, oh, you're having a hard time, I'm sorry, come here again, the therapist leader, lots of affection, and oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, there is a moment for empathy, absolutely, and even validation. You know what, anyone in your position would feel very busy right now. It's totally normal to feel very busy. That's not in the box. What's in the box is, oh, you're so busy. Well, what can I take off your plate? How can I shift your work priorities? You want them to come to you with that if you can. And as leaders, because we're human leaders, we're not robots, we all have a tendency to get in the box. And, what does it look like inside the box? Well, it's not your fault that you didn't get that report done. I'm going to go over to Sarah, and that's kind of where we have a tendency. It's almost like we become a parent figure. Or, don't you worry, I have a plan. I'm going to fix all of this. We may even have a tendency, this is what I call like the genie is out of the bottle. Well, if you thought that Mike over in accounting had it out for you, you were right, because I saw him. Now you are in the box. Once you say something like that to the employee, it's very difficult for them to see you as a coach. They see you a kind of, like a parent. And that is not who you want to be. And this would, what parent figures do. We all have had parents. And even when we were younger, my dad walked to school, literally in Detroit. He used to have to walk to school every day. It was about a mile. Oh, let me tell you about a time in my career. Or, you know what? I'm going to call Susie and I'm going to tell her that our department's not going to get pushed around, right? What happens is you've taken the developmental focus off of the person, and now you're carrying it. You own it. It's like this child. She's very cute. She's a cute child, but now she's on your back, right? We all have a tendency to want to rush in and help. But if we just slowed down, listened, and asked more questions, you may be very surprised at the outcome, and that how independent your people and your teams really are when you just ask more questions and don't pick up, again, don't let that genie out of the bottle.
I have a question. Is
Sure.
there a time though when relating to each other can be used as a strength so that you connect on that level? Like, I have been in your shoes. So, I understand what you're saying, but like sometimes the tendency is because you want to relate to each other and show like,
You can, but I would be careful, right? So I would say that would be a proceed with caution. Take your foot off of the gas in that conversation. You can definitely open that is more of what a mentor would do.
Mhm.
When I was young and in your career, when I was 25, here's how I used to solve that problem. And it's not allowing them to think for themselves. If you're using it to display empathy and maybe validate that, yeah, oh, wow, you're right. This is hard. This is a hard problem, but I know that you can solve it. So tell me, what have you already tried? Versus, well, yeah, you're right, it's hard. When I was 25, here's what I did, and my boss did this, and you've burned that time not helping them solve the problem. You know what I'm saying? But if it is to be more of a mentor, because a mentor is not a coach. Mentors speak from, and that's more, to me, that sits kind of in the mentor quadrant. If you are a formal mentor to that person, absolutely that's relevant. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So, remembering we start with the relationship, and that, every conversation, even that one that we just talked about, has the potential to increase performance and development. We think, oh, this is just a Slack chat, go here, fix this, edit this. And sometimes, yeah, if you're editing a document, you're going to tell them that I've copy edited and here's what I edited. But really looking at it like, should I be using this as a coaching opportunity so that the next time I'm called in to edit something, maybe the work product would be a little bit better? Tell me about your process. How did we get to this stage? Why do you think this paragraph is really important or pertinent? Those kinds of things. I think oftentimes we're just like edit, 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 take it, and now they go fix it. So kind of really thinking about your leadership as, you are like the chief development officer of your people, and how you coach and bring them along is really important, because otherwise you will just be that parent figure, fixing all of their problems, solving every issue, and never really being able to move into more leadership, and you'll just always be managing. It will never change unless you change. And I know that's a hard, notion to kind of think about. But when Elise talks about delegation, if you couple that with coaching leadership, you may find, hey, I have a little more time. I'm actually going to lean in here on this coaching and really try it, because what you have to try this in order to get really good at it. And so it's like, I'm going to go into this session and I'm only going to ask questions. I'm not going to tell stories. I'm not going to talk about other departments. I'm just going to listen and ask questions. Very difficult to do, but can be very, very powerful for the people you work with. So Elise, do you want to drive?
Yeah,
for
I
this?
think I will. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. Making sure you all can see my screen okay. Good. So good stuff, right? Thinking about being a coach. I think all of us as leaders would say one of my biggest goals is to try to empower people around me. Because what happens when we don't, right? What if we fall back into some of the patterns that Janet was pointing out as, oh, we become the fairy godmother or the parent or, the perpetual problem solver, or a lot of times, and I see this with so many of my clients, they end up just sort of holding on to things because they just can't bring themselves to let go of it, probably for a lot of reasons. Some of it may be, well, my people aren't quite ready for this. But I think if we were really honest with ourselves, sometimes we hold tightly because we haven't empowered our people, and we struggle letting go of control. I don't know hardly any leader that doesn't like to have some amount of control, because of course, ultimately it all seems to fall back on us to be responsible for the outcomes that we want our team to produce. But there is a way, there is an art to figuring out how to be a good delegator and how to avoid some of the traps that I think we can easily fall into when we don't delegate. Let's stop for a minute and just sort of think about the future reality of us as leaders. What is it going to be like when I have mastered the art of delegation and I've really properly empowered and equipped and enabled people around me? Well, just look on the screen here, pick out any or all of these benefits that you might like to have as a part of your regular leadership walk and your work. You're going to find there's so much better distribution of work. Things get done in a much more timely manner. People are going to get developed and stretched as they grow and take on new assignments. Greater ownership and accountability. There's so much that we want out of other people to sort of shoulder that burden of leadership and for getting things done. So often I think when we hold tightly too, we become that bottleneck, because we just can't seem to share things in a way that allows us to enjoy really good benefits like this. And I think honestly, if this is just a crucial skill as a leader, you're not really going to be seen as a highly effective leader if you cannot effectively delegate. The flip side of that is when you have learned to be able to delegate effectively, you are seen as what I like to think of as a multiplying leader. You just sort of have that Midas touch that every project, every team that you touch, just all these good benefits come as a result of it, and not just through you, not just through one person's ability, but through an entire team. An entire team is lifted to the next level because of your ability to lead them. So let me just walk you through a couple of steps. There is a guide. You may have already seen it for those who like to do a little bit of pre-reading. And if you haven't had a chance, don't worry. It's in the Dropbox for this week's session on the steps that you can take in order to delegate. So very first thing you want to do is sit down and make a list of all the projects or responsibilities that another person could assume. And they could assume it if they had the right resources, the authority, proper ramp up time, that they were properly equipped to do it, but they could do it. And you might be a bit shocked when you make this list at how long it is. I remember when I first did this, when I began to say, well, nobody could run this account like I do, or well, like I was the one who started this process. So, well, of course I know it better. I had all these rationalizations in my mind that made me hold on to things when in reality, so much of this could have been done by other people. And in fact, some of it could be done a lot better than other people if I was willing to let it go. So step one is to make the list. Step two is to simply sit there and think now about the team that you have. What are the resources around you? What are their strengths? What do they bring to the table, maybe uniquely so? Or perhaps, what are their interests in developing some new talents and abilities? So this is you kind of thinking, oh yeah, this person's really good at this. And this person I know wants to become good at this. And this is where you're beginning to think about, there's a potential to maybe make a match. Maybe there's a development opportunity I give somebody. Or if I know somebody's long-term career goal is to become, the CFO someday, how do I push them more into that role, even with just small projects that would help them build confidence and would increase their learning and really help them get there? So step two is to just do a bit of assessment. And step three then is to empower the team. And here's where you make the match. And what I suggest is that you meet with each person individually. You don't have to go and make a series of appointments. You can just include this perhaps in your one-on-ones with people to say, hey, I've been thinking about some new things for you, some new opportunities. And I want to know, what do you want to take on? What are your interests and goals this year and for the future? What might you be interested in taking on as a stretch assignment? So you engage them in the conversation. You can propose some ideas to them too. Say, hey, I've been thinking about our conversation. Here's 2 or 3 things that I thought you might like to try your hand at this year. What do you think? And of course, the key here is you want to gain their agreement. You don't want to just do sort of the dump and run to say, here, I'm giving this to you, whether you want it or not, because we all know how well that's going to go over. But you want to get them excited. And this is part of coaching too, is to say, tell me what you think you might get out of taking on an assignment like this. Tell me what maybe is holding you back, because a lot of times it's just the natural fear of failure. Like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this, or this seems so big. What if I can't figure out how to do it? Or what if I fail and it's in front of, a group of people? How am I going to handle that? So there may be fears that you want to kind of coach them through. We'll get to that in a minute on how you overcome that. But once people agree to say, yes, I'm going to take on this opportunity, then I feel good about saying, let's share the news with the team. because part of what you're doing with that subtly is by announcing the responsibilities, you're creating an opportunity for somebody to have the spotlight. You're putting praise in the right place by showcasing a person willing to take on an assignment. What that will tell other people on the team is, I want to step up too. If I want to get that kind of recognition, then I need to raise my hand as well. So you're encouraging, you're praising the behavior you want repeated on the rest of the team. And then step 4 is you hand things off. Now, this is where the art part comes, because as I said, a lot of times we tend to sort of say, okay, Janet, here you go. Like, let me know when it's done, but don't come back.
What do I do?
Yeah, she's like, I have no idea what to do. I mean, I said yes, but I don't know how to do this, or maybe I know, but I'm not quite sure. I might have questions. So what do you do? And here is where I have created for you 4 different strategies of how to delegate, depending on the person and the assignment. Show, share, teach, and ask. Now, let me walk you through these. And these are all laid out in that document, the 4, but so just kind of hang on and listen as I walk you through each of the strategies. So strategy number 1 is to show them. This is when the person says, I don't have any experience, or I don't have any understanding about how to do this particular task. And then you want to say to them, you know what? You're going to shadow me. You're going to watch me go through this project from start to finish. I'm going to show you how it's done. You can take notes, you can video me, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to show you all along the way. You're going to kind of be my shadow over my shoulder so you can see exactly how this is done. So that's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is to share. This is when a person probably has seen a situation many times before. They have a pretty good idea of what the assignment and the goal is, but like they don't really know all the details. And this might be where you need to share with them relevant resources, maybe explain how something's been done in the past and how that worked. And of course, encouraging them to try new things to see if they get a different result. Maybe it's saying, hey, I'm going to give you this contact person's name and phone number. You should call them and let them sort of explain how something works, or go through a simple training on this program, or whatever it might be. But you're sharing resources, files, and experiences with them so they go, okay, I got it. Yeah, these are the details I needed. Now let me go and see if I can tackle it. And very often, of course, they'll do it better. So that's the advantage of share. Number 3 is to teach. And this is where just in general principle, when you delegate, you want to stay close enough to coach somebody along the way, kind of running alongside them from a distance, so you can be there to jump in if something happens and they need your help. So this is where somebody's like, yeah, I know the steps and I'm going along through the process, but oh my goodness, something happened. Like, I don't know what to do. You told me this would happen, but instead this happened. What do I do? And of course, this is a coaching opportunity, right? Where you can ask them the good questions, tell me what's happening. What do you think you might try? What would be a good next step? You're trying to help them identify what went wrong and kind of keep them back on track, help them figure out what are some of the things that they could do that might be different. And in this case, you might actually be not quite a coach, but you might be the teacher to say, well, here are some things that you can try to see if you can solve the problem and continue to move forward. So that's teach. And then the 4th one is ask. And this is the pure coaching of all. This is when somebody does know how to execute, but they run into a challenge. I guess just like I described a minute ago, maybe that's more like this situation where they just need some reassurance and they need a little bit of can you affirm me in this process? Here's what I've been thinking. Is that the right thing to try in this particular situation? So the key is, just as Janet's been teaching the last couple of minutes, is how do you help them discover their own insights? Because your goal, of course, is for them to be able to do this on their own without you. So it's perfectly okay. And you want to encourage, come back to me if you have a question. I'll help you think it through. But ultimately, this is your project and I want you to own it, and I'm not going to take it back from you. So that is step number 4, strategy number 4. Just the last thing I want to share with you here on is how to coach for the win, because this kind of ties all of what Janet was teaching you and just what I've shared about delegation together for just a little bit, which is as you delegate and hand things off to people, encourage them to write things down. You may want to write things down too, to make sure that what people are hearing and saying is what you intend. The key there is to be specific. Don't just say, here, you need to go and make this happen. Maybe that's okay, but chances are you wanted some specific things to happen. And so you want to be sure to write things down, have them write them down, maybe review it a bit together. If those steps are important, if the how is important, you want to be specific. You want to stay close enough to coach your team through all the ups and downs. Again, this is the idea of sort of running alongside them in a distance, checking in with them. How's it going? Let me know if you have some questions or some problems. And then, of course, ultimately, this is where most leaders really struggle, is resist the temptation to take something back, even when things get kind of tough and you're feeling the heat of the moment. Sometimes you will jump to a problem-solving mode if the clock is ticking and the client is waiting. That's okay. There are times for that. Other times you have the space and the time to help somebody think it through, but don't take it back or else it's going to land on your lap forever. And then I have a bonus step for you. And this is just something, again, as a good leader, for you to step back and sort of ask yourself, well, if I've handed some things off, what should I be focusing on now? And this one I really like, because very often we will find that we actually have been buried in the day-to-day. We are engaged in tactical work that we don't really need to be involved in. It isn't that it wasn't important, or maybe that you didn't do it for a period of time, but that as your role needs to evolve as a leader, you need to put your focus elsewhere. You need to be spending the mental space and carving out the time to focus on the more strategic items. Of course, we'll talk about that when we get to the strategic thinking and planning session, but it's really beginning to shift your role upwards in the organization to be working at a higher level. It is the idea of having more impact with what you do in your work. Again, you might be great at getting things done and you might be great at the tactical work. And there are times, as Janet said earlier, when we sort of put on that manager hat. But almost always we could be more of a leader than we allow ourselves to. And this is where I really want to push you, because I'll tell you, when I went through this process myself and I sat down, I had delegated a lot of things that I thought I was very good at. Then I sat down to figure out some of the things I need to be doing instead. I was scared to death, because when I looked at this list of things that I thought I should be focusing on, I realized I really didn't know how to do very many of them at all. And that's the last point, which is to be a learning leader. If you say, okay, I don't know how to do these things now, but my organization or my team's success depends on me rising to the occasion here and learning how to do the things that I should be focused on. I think that's so important. It's how you propel yourself forward in your own leadership journey, instead of being stuck in the weeds doing the tactical work. So you see how those two things go together. Thinking like a leader, coaching my people, delegating effectively, so that ultimately you can rise in your role, as well as helping other leaders around you to do the same. Questions or thoughts? I'm going to stop sharing here. Questions or thoughts on delegation? Okay. The document is in the Dropbox. Janet, why don't we go ahead then and we'll move everybody into the Troika exercise.
Yeah, well, let me just do a quick review of what the Troika exercise is, so everybody knows what we're working on here. Give me just a second. Where? Okay. So Harmony dropped a link in the chat for those of you that are in the Dropbox where you will have access to this section of the presentation today. And the reason why we're doing this, and it'll be groups of 3 or possibly 4, Troika stands like for 3. And essentially one person is going to be the coachee. So they're going to be coming to the coach who will be appointed in the Troika with a difficult challenge or situation. That slide that we started at the top of the class. The other individual will also be the timekeeper, because there are going to be a few things here that we're going to have to keep track of regarding timing of this. So if you get to your Troika and you realize, oh, we don't have a clear person to volunteer, essentially the coachee, the person with the difficult challenge or situation, is the person whose first name is closest to the letter A. We just pick something randomly. Our hope is that you'll get into the breakout and, Catherine will be like, okay, I'll volunteer. the coach, and then of course someone has to play the role of coach and timekeeper. There will be a couple of groups of 4. If there are 4 people, then the 4th person will also become a coach. Only one person is getting coaching in this breakout. So essentially the coachee will, okay, I'll be the coachee. You will just talk uninterrupted for about 4 to 5 minutes, just outlining the way that a direct report would come to you with all of the things that are worrying them or bothering them about this difficult situation that they're facing. And the coaches are just sitting and nodding and listening. We're really not interrupting yet at this stage. They can say a couple of prompts. Tell me more. What else? But we're really trying to just actively listen and not ask a ton of questions yet. We really want to see if we can get the whole issue out on the table. Remember what I talked about? You almost kind of want to exhaust the person, not exhaust them, but you want to get the whole situation out on the table without asking questions yet. After about 4 or 5 minutes, the timekeeper will say, okay, let's switch. From there, you can start to practice all of those open-ended, empowering questions. And you kind of have to self-monitor, you'll find this is really hard to do. A closed-ended question. Did you try this? Yes. Discussion over. So we want to really try to have those questions be, remember, how or what kind of questions. So you'll do that for about 4 or 5 minutes, depending on, so we're only going to have a brief window here to try this. And then, there's a wrap up when you're done. So the coachee has talked for the 5 minutes, you guys have asked questions, and then the coachee, you're not even coming to solution, but the coachee through the coaching will probably know, oh, wait a minute, I know what I'm supposed to do now regarding this. They'll have a next step from just talking it out. You'd be very surprised. And then, we're kind of curious, for all of you, that are the coaches, what's it like to actively listen and not interrupt somebody for 5 full minutes? And also for the coachee, what was it like to get to talk about this problem for 5 minutes, just being uninterrupted? It can be very, very freeing. So if you have time, we'd like for you to do a little bit of a debrief. Not all the groups will. We don't want you to worry about that per se. And then in the handout, right, there are all different kinds of coaching questions that you can try on for size and see how they feel in the moment. Not all of these are going to work for you. If it, depending on the situation that someone is bringing, right? So it could be maybe that they're, they don't have enough time, or they're stressed, or maybe there's some relationship that's gone wrong on the job, or that they're having trouble taking action. You can use these as kind of a little bit of a cheat sheet. And in the handout in Dropbox, I have a whole nother set of all kinds of great empowering questions. You can kind of see we rarely use these kinds of questions on the job because we're usually so busy and time pressed. So we want you to really try this today. Does anybody have any questions on what you're doing in the breakout? All right, so we're going to go to it. I'm going to ask Harmony to break us out. And oh, these are not recorded, by the way. The breakouts are not recorded. They are private to this group.